to the second webinar on student recruitment best practices. This time we will take a closer look at messaging and communication strategy. My name is Louise Allerud, and I'm very excited to be hosting the second session of this webinar series. Before we start, I want to quickly go through some housekeeping. During the webinar, everyone except the panelists will be muted. If you want to ask questions, feel free to use the Q&A tab. This webinar will be recorded and sent to you early next week. And if you experience any technical issues, please send an email to marketing@keystoneacademic.com. Firstly, I want to introduce today's panel. We are very lucky to again have Chris Smart joining us, and I'm also excited to welcome Stefania Corrado from John Cabot University to our panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. Since we have people that did not join our last session, I will quickly introduce myself as well. I head up the recruit team here at Keystone. I have worked with student recruitment since 2009, including recruiting master students from one of the world's largest international business schools. Stefania and Chris and I aim to have another interesting conversation about student recruitment. We have received many questions during registrations for today's webinar, which we have incorporated into each section of the presentation. But first of all, Stefania and Chris, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure the audience would love to hear from you as well. So I think maybe we start with you, Stefania. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course, yes. It's such a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me. You know, during this time, it's really nice to be able to help fellow colleagues as we're still trying to navigate and adapt to this new recruiting landscape. So my name is Stefania. I am the Assistant Director of Admissions for undergraduate admissions at John Cabot University. I started my career focusing in international education at JCU just over 6 years ago. And now I have the pleasure of working with both US and international admissions and students. I'm originally from Philadelphia and studied at American University in Washington, D.C. Maybe we have some other AU Eagles in the audience today. But yeah, thank you again for having me, and I'm looking forward to the session.
Great, thank you so much, Stefania. And Chris, for the people that weren't here last time, could you have a quick introduction about yourself as well, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Chris. I work for Learn Direct. We've introduced a global foundation year program, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with in concept. We're the world's first global online foundation diploma, so that's quite exciting. I've worked in student recruitment now for my sins for about 11 years or so, but I've always worked internationally, be it student facing or otherwise. So yeah, very happy to be here again and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Great. Okay, let's get started. As we discussed in the previous webinar, the higher education industry has become highly competitive, and you need to make sure that you have a clear strategy and that you target the right people with relevant content that appeals to them. This last year, we have encountered many unforeseen challenges, and we have had to change the way we communicate, the way we interact, and the way we teach. But the great news is that we see that most students are still dedicated to international studies, and we therefore should consistently nurture these despite any delays. And it's not only due to the pandemic that things are changing. Also, the students that we are recruiting are from different generations. And we need to adapt the communication to how they search and absorb information, sorry. Okay, so let's have a look on what to consider when you evaluate your messaging strategy. What is your recruitment goal? Are there certain markets you want to target? And will you have the same messaging to all these markets, or do you need to tailor your approach? And are you wanting to attract students to apply as soon as possible for an upcoming deadline? Or do you want to build a pool of qualified students for next year? Make sure that you have the answers to all of these questions before you map out your strategy plan. And Chris, I want to bring you in here, if that's okay. So when it comes to frequency of emails and messages, do you have any best practice tips on how often you should send information? And is there such a thing as too often?
I think too often is the fear, right? So it's always the elephant in the room. Everyone always worries that it's too much. I have seen too much. I think that's definitely something you can do. I came across a North American institution that was sending, I think, 3 emails per week. That's probably too much, right? So that's an easy decision to make. In terms of frequency, though, I think just consistency is the most important. I think the problem with admissions in general, at the very top level, is there's not a lot of transparency and consistency in the process. If they're receiving something and if they know when they're going to receive it, frequency is less important. If you tell them up front that we're going to reach out to you once a week, once every 2 weeks, we're going to reach out to you once and then never again, it doesn't really matter so much as just telling them and letting them know how it's going to work. But in general, I think the frequency is, for 90% of people in the world, I think you can do it more frequent and have smaller touch points.
Yeah. Yeah, Stefania, do you agree on that you need to have multiple, maybe smaller messages and emails, as Chris mentions here?
Yes, for sure. I definitely agree with that. We definitely try to keep a cap on how frequent we email our leads. But one thing that we're also doing now more than ever is always incorporating whatever we're sending via email in our other platforms as well, whether that be on social media or now with a WhatsApp group chat. So we're always trying to make sure that whatever we're sending out via email, we're also putting somewhere else, because we know that the students are not reading their emails as much as they're on their social media platform and looking at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I briefly mentioned Gen Z, the new generation. And I think, as you say, it is important to adapt to how they communicate. And do you feel like you're getting more feedback when you're using, let's say, WhatsApp or Messenger, these kind of channels?
Yes, for sure. I would say that this generation, is very savvy customers. So they're growing up in hyper consumerism. They're inundated with information and ads all the time. So they're really able to distinguish when your message is not personalized. So whenever we're using social media and WhatsApp group chats, there are things that allow us to be a little bit more personal, but also to leverage our social media to generate content from them. So interacting with them, engaging them, asking them questions as to what they want to know from us. So that way we're actually answering and giving them the information that they want instead of us trying to decipher what they want. So I think that's really helpful.
If you have a university with very limited resources and they have to choose one thing that they focus on, what, in your opinion, would be the most efficient way to communicate with students?
Well, that's a great question. I think during this time, especially, we're all kind of realizing what it's like to be working understaffed and not with many resources, because people maybe who are already understaffed before are now even more than ever. So I would say I'm really a huge fan of the social media. I feel like it works so well. So I always like to be putting as much communication into that as possible. For example, at JCU, we actually started our own admissions Instagram. So it's, you know, not always on the JCU main page, but on our admission. So, you know, posting about our deadlines and all that kind of important information is not coming out just in email, but also on the social media platform, and understanding where it is that they are, because Facebook is becoming obsolete for this generation. So I wouldn't focus your energy on that. It's probably good for parents and older students, maybe grad students, but for the undergrad in this generation, Instagram is the way to go, and TikTok eventually will be the big thing, which is it's starting to become, at least.
And would you need a social media expert on your team to handle this, or can anyone learn and communicate with students through these channels?
Absolutely not. We don't have a social media expert. I mean, of course, it's good to at least have your brand, your image, and continue to use that in your social, in terms of the graphics that you're using in the pictures. But really, the important thing is that you can put that authentic content in there. So you can have your students posting, you can have them doing takeovers, you can have your professors doing a live together with a student and having conversations. And that is what they're really into. So of course, it would be better if you could have a social media office. But if that's not possible, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be on social. Of course, like, be on there and have that kind of authentic experience shown in your platforms.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. We'll move on a little bit, but I'm sure we will touch back on that later during this webinar as well. So I want to go through a few do's and don'ts with you. Always test and measure what you do so that you can adjust what is working and not. And in my experience, it's best to be as personal as possible. I think a positive student journey will increase conversion for your students as well. One of the most important things is always have a call to action in your communication, at least emails, so that you can invite them to webinars or add an apply now button to make sure that they interact with you in some way. Another thing is to have a system that tracks students and results, so you can better tweak your strategy as well, to have a CRM system, and it can be a simplified one, but that you have control of what's happening with your student leads. And for the don'ts, I would say don't leave the leads without contacting them. And if you don't reach out to the students, someone else will. And also make sure that you keep the leads warm also after application. Don't forget them. Keep them engaged also after this stage. And we're going to also talk more about that later. Chris, from your experience, do you have an example where you had to deal with something where things didn't really go as planned with your strategy, where you had to adjust along the way?
Probably every day for the last 10 years, but if you want one that sticks out, I mean, I think in general, the mistake that we make in recruitment is that we, as you mentioned, we've got a call to actions, we've got CRMs, we've got our KPIs, but these are our KPIs. These are not the students' KPIs. We have our pipeline. We know what the stages are. We decide what's important. But again, these are not the students. So there is definitely a disconnect here, and it's the disconnect between the individual and the global. It's impossible to manage every individual application on a personal level when you're dealing with thousands of applications. So I think just as a general guideline, where we've made the biggest mistakes, it's been where we've treated student applications like leads. We've just had them as just numbers and ones, data points, and there's so much that data can do for you. I'm not anti-data at all. It's critical to have a CRM which speaks to you. But it's, again, always remembering to put the human element into that approach. You mentioned a little bit about the new generation. I don't think they're super different than any generation before, but they are very savvy, as Stefania mentioned. And I think that they do see when they're just getting automated responses from a monolith institution, uncaring institution, versus getting a personal touch from somebody else. And just like every other generation, they'll follow where they feel a personal connection. So the biggest mistakes I think we've made is when we forgot to add that personal connection. Some people were mentioning I saw some questions about WhatsApp and TikTok, and is that weird? I mean, we're institutions. Is it unprofessional? Is it a hassle? But again, I just think you have to be where the students are. And if the students are there, you have to be playing in the same space. It doesn't mean that we have to do everything. I mean, we all know that we could go down a rabbit hole with one WhatsApp, with one student, and spend a whole year with that student on WhatsApp. Of course, we know that. But so maybe it's not just about recruiting on WhatsApp, but it's about giving people information and pushing that out in a structured way on WhatsApp, for example. But yeah, it's the human thing comes out to me a lot.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move on a little bit. We did a student survey with 20,000 students, and we got some great insight to what kind of information students want and need when they're applying to schools and universities. And we asked them about their motivation for choosing where to study. And I think this slide is a great place to start if you need ideas for student communication as well, to make sure that you have different messages and mails with content about these things. Stefania, do you, from this slide, is it things that you also cover in the communication to your students at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. I think those first two topics at the top are the most important thing for this generation specifically, just because they're aware of the investment that they are making and are very much focused on the opportunities that they will have after they graduate. So they are really focused on understanding your academic programs, but they want to get a little bit more specific. They want to know what the class is like, what kind of topics they're going to be covering in the classes, which are questions that we started to get now. And kind of going back to the social media thing, we've been able to also use that platform to kind of showcase special classes and topics that our professors have been covering since everything is digital now. So kind of just taking advantage of that while we have this information available. So yeah, definitely very important topics.
Great. Chris, do you have anything to add on
just maybe one thing about understanding student motivations. I think everybody's got a pretty good website these days. Everyone's got the information to hand. It's rarer to see what I used to see in the increasingly the old days, which is where you just couldn't get the information. Maybe just one challenge that I find is a little bit more current is maybe there's too much information. The students rightly see themselves more as customers these days. Stefania is totally right. They're thinking about, what are you going to bring to me? My generation, we were just sort of, oh, thank you for even considering me. Now they're way more demanding than that, and they should be. I think we've sort of splurged and put all of our information online. There's just a mountain of statistics and stats and information everywhere. So then that's great. We've ticked that box. I think the next step then is clarity of information. Are they getting what they need when they need it? When they see information about, this is the most common mistake I see all the time, is every university's got a bunch of finance information and no call to action. It's like, okay, great. I've read that. I've absorbed it. Now what? Do I click back 5 times and click on contact us? I mean, just make it easy for people. The attention span, I mean, I don't think the attention span of the new generation is that much less. My attention span is 0. So if I've read something and if I like it, where do I click? What's next? So just giving them information that's actionable and relevant, I think that's the new target we should all try and achieve if we can.
Yeah, that's what we're getting used to everywhere else, right? So perfect. I want to continue a little bit on ideas of content. So as I mentioned last time as well, make sure that you always focus on your unique selling points. What can you offer that your competitors can't? And make sure that you highlight this. We did talk a little bit about it, Stefania, but do you have any type of content that you think is received best by your students? What do you get any feedback that, oh, I love this, you know, this was super useful, or things like that?
Yeah, certainly. So going off on kind of how academics is such an important point and content for students, one thing that we developed during this time was doing academic roundtables discussions with professors and alumni. And the reason why this was such great content was that there was no presentation. It was literally just a raw, authentic discussion between professors and alumni in that same major academic department. And students were really able to understand, first of all, the relationship that has been created among that professor and that alumni as they're talking about the time that, you know, maybe he got a C on a test for something, and kind of just having those discussions and memories amongst each other. But that makes the content so much more engaging and interactive as well, because what I'm finding now is that it's so much better when you ask students to, or when you give them the space to be able to communicate. And, you know, we want to know what your questions are and we'll answer them, instead of us creating 25 slides of presentation and not understanding if it's relevant to them or if it's engaging or interactive. So these roundtable discussions were really, really interesting. And, you know, since everything is digital, what we had decided to do with this content as well was put it on a podcast. And we created a podcast channel. So the information is readily available, like Chris was saying. I mean, you need to have it ready when they want it. So that next action, you like this, okay, go check out our podcast channel and look at all the other resources that are there for you.
That's a brilliant ideas. And what I really like about that roundtable discussion as well, it doesn't require a lot of preparation. So it's very efficient as well, which is fantastic. And you can do it over and over. Yeah. Is that something that you do once every month, or has that been once? Do you have a plan for that?
Yeah, so our plan was to, well, we started it in June, and it was a month-long series, but every week we would have a different academic department represented. And then it went so well, it was received so well by the students that we did one again in October, so we're targeting the leads at this point, because June and October is usually when we start receiving our applications for fall 2021 intake. What we've decided to do now is actually a different kind of series, but kind of the same thing, called Major Meetups, where we're using Zoom meetings instead of webinar functions. So the students attending also have their video on and can use their microphone and ask their questions live, and have the opportunity to speak with the professor and the alumni face to face and have those discussions and be involved. And this is targeting our admits and our applications. So to get them to yield, because of course now with COVID, the personal contact of course is lacking. So trying to get them in there. And of course, another important thing with this generation is the peer-to-peer influence. So meeting other students who have been admitted into the same program. And that's super important for them, because once they create a group or a niche, then it's very hard for them to deny the university in the end, because they've already created friendships and relationships with students that they're going to be studying with.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to talk a bit more about that later on as well, how to best utilize current students and alumni. I want to also take a look at, and we for the audience that attended the last webinar, this slide might look familiar, but I think it's so important that I want to repeat a couple of points here. This is really, just to go into each section of the student journey, from when you receive the student lead, all the way to how you can make sure that you have happy alumni who will share their great experience with the world, as you say, Stefania. And Chris, we had a discussion about this last time as well. And to start from the beginning of the student journey, could you give some insight on what you think is the best approach once you receive a student lead? How would you kind of start the student journey, if you may?
At the very, very beginning, I think you have to be quite aggressive. I think you have to, hopefully you've got a plan, you've got a lead nurturing strategy. I think you have to reach out as soon as possible. Because that's when the students decided to reach out to you. And so again, it's all about mirroring as much as possible what the student wants to do when they want to do it. And if he or she's decided that right now is the time that I'm going to reach out and learn from you, that's kind of a big decision. Again, talking about the students being savvy, they know that once they click, I want to hear more, that they're going to hear back. They know that they've suddenly given away their personal, private information, contact information, which they don't do very easily, and that they're now going to hear back. So if they get nothing back in a week, I think that's just a terrible sign. I think that the admissions should be a sort of a sign of what the university is like. And if it takes a week to apply to a reach out, maybe the professors will do the same if they're on the university course. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if you reach out quickly and if you're responsive, that just puts everything, your best foot forward as an institution. So it's not about spamming them or frequency, it's just about being quick and agile and responsive. So I think that's the most important thing that I think we've always done as an improvement over what was done before.
Yeah. With Keystone Recruit, we aim to contact the student lead within 48 hours. And that's because we see the faster we are, the higher the pickup rate and the better conversion we have. So I completely agree with you there. Stefania, kind of moving on the student journey path here. Do you have any tips or ideas on how can we, after the student has received some information, how do we, first of all, get the student to start the application, but also what are you doing at your university to make sure that the application is completed?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and kind of like what Chris was saying, you really have to get them while they're hot. So as soon as they have expressed interest in your institution, contact them and really nurture them with this more personalized kind of message. So this is something that we've been doing a lot. Once they apply to the institution, they don't actually get as much communication as they were getting at the lead stage, just because of the way that our CRM works. Once they're in application, they are getting a separate kind of email template, let's say. So it's really up to the counselor to kind of make sure that they're always staying in touch. But when we are at that stage, we do use the phone a lot more. So we pick up and we call the applicants, or we'll text them, especially if they're just missing a few other documents. And especially now in this time, it's important to be really empathetic towards the situation of students who are applying, because they don't have access to testing, or they're just very anxious and nervous and afraid that you're not going to consider their application because maybe, they thought that they sent in their letter of recommendation, but it's not coming up on our portal. So our communication to them has been really kind of empathetic and setting up kind of the expectations, like, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine. And that's really helped us in our turnover. And actually this year we've seen a huge increase, not just in applications, but in converting those applicants, which is really not always easy to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we also see that with Keystone Recruit, that you really do need to nurture and, as you say, be empathetic and support them through that. And I think some admissions officers feel like if they haven't completed their application, they're not serious, they're not good enough students for us. And I think that's a bit of an arrogant approach. And as you say, especially now, there can be so many reasons for why they haven't been able to complete that application. Do you agree, Chris, on this from your experience with this part of the application process?
Sure. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of confusion about what the students are doing. I don't think we have the data. I mean, again, we see that we've got 500 applicants, 30% have submitted X, Y, and Z, 40% have done A, B, and C, and something in between. And I think it's natural, we're humans, we like to find patterns. So we sort of say, well, you know, the students who haven't completed this, they can't be as serious as the ones who have completed this. And we make all these different assumptions, but we don't really know. You can find out, you can ask, but I think the danger is when you don't ask. One of these assumptions is, okay, they've completed the application. Now, I'm sure they've done the same at another 3 institutions and there's nothing we can do about it, and we'll convert a percentage, and that's just life. You know, I see a lot of institutional bias when it comes to this type of thing. But of course, for me, once a student is accepted, that's when you really need to put a lot of work in, conversely, because you've spent so much time already, so much money potentially, so much marketing time, so many of your precious hours getting these students in. And it's a terrible idea then just to leave them to stew. So, you know, yeah, what is your nurturing, not for leads, but for accepted students? You know, are you introducing them to alumni? As Stefania mentioned, it's so sticky. I mean, if they meet somebody else who's going to join, if they've seen a professor and heard her talk about something in an unpolished way that makes them feel that they've got a connection, it's so easy to do, and that student is very likely to join. So it's just about making sure you've got the right interventions at each point.
Yeah, and we, from that student survey that we did, we see that the majority of the students are applying to 2 or more, both programs and institutions. Stefania, from that acceptance stage, do you have a clear strategy on how to keep them engaged after that point?
Yes, for sure. So we've definitely worked really hard on our yield strategy this year because we weren't expecting to have an increase in applications. So now we're kind of worried, like, okay, well, the pandemic is still happening, so we don't know what to expect in terms of yield. So let's have all of our bases checked. So like I said, kind of incorporating those major meetups, having more interactive and engagement, but getting those students to meet each other and make friends with each other. So we'll do another type of series similar to major meetups, which we're calling continental chats, which is putting students, admitted students together from the same region or continent. So trying to get students to interact on that level. So that's something that we're doing, but we really are focusing our efforts on getting students to make friends with each other. So what we were finding as well is that those Facebook admitted groups are just becoming like grave sites. I mean, they're not using them anymore. So that's when we decided, let's just do a WhatsApp group. So we don't do WhatsApp groups for our inquiries. We did try that and it did not work. But for the accepted students, wow, I mean, that thing is just blowing up my phone all the time. But it's great. I mean, and I mention it to them. I'm like, I'm here. If you have a question, tag me, but we're not moderating this. So feel free to, you know, just talk with each other and mingle. But of course, they always go on and do their own groups, their own Snapchats and whatever it is that they're on. But that's something that we've done this year that's really working well. And I mean, just to be able to give that immediate message, like I said before, when you're trying to promote an event to your admits, I'm going to mention it in the WhatsApp group. And I know that they're going to get that immediate access to it. And so if they're interested, they can sign up. Whereas email, they don't check it as often, or maybe it went to spam sometimes. So the WhatsApp group really works even just for promoting events for them, answering their questions, and the social media as well. So one thing that we've done with our accepted students is we're promoting or encouraging them to share their excitement of being admitted on their own social media platforms. So it's a way to also create awareness in their own populations and maybe get more leads out of it in the end.
That's great. And do you see that kind of creating that community early on, does that also help you with the alumni afterwards to continue that, you know, camaraderie between the school and the students?
Yes, absolutely. Because even now we see that as we're posting these things, alumni, of course, are following our social media as well. So they are responding to it and being more interested and being more willing to kind of participate in the different events going on. When we were promoting our roundtable, for example, and, you know, sharing which alumni were going to be on the discussions, other alumni had actually signed up for it. I mean, even if it wasn't aimed or targeted towards them, they just felt like they were being part of the community again and listening to those great stories. So we find that it's really helping just the overall general community, which is important right now, because when you have hybrid class models and you can't do on-person events on campus as you could before, this is a way to just keep your community together.
Okay, great input from both of you. Thank you very much. We'll move on a little bit. Yeah, I just want to summarize here as well, like we talked about, have a plan for each part of the student journey and make sure that you know the right place and time for your content. A student in the beginning of the application journey needs completely different set of communication than someone who has completed their application. So my advice would be, don't overload the students with irrelevant information. Find the perfect time and place to send it. We will move on a little bit to the impact of COVID. So as we know, it's been over a year since lockdown happened, and in many parts of the world, the chance to study on campus is still not accessible, maybe, most likely. And with many universities hoping to return to the classroom for the fall semester of 2021, I want to talk about the evolution of communication related to COVID and how we stand today and how, or if it has evolved since last March. So maybe start with you, Stefania, here. Has your communication strategy changed since COVID hit last year?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, our communication strategy definitely, I mean, we had to adapt and pivot our strategy very quickly, and also just to make ourselves more efficient, because the reality was budget cuts, working from home, just less manpower in general. So we really needed to make sure that we were using the resources that we have efficiently. And you know, just like many others, we were in an institution that relied heavily on strategic travel recruitment and in-person fairs. So we didn't have that much experience in digital or armchair recruitment. And we really had to think quickly and kind of reinvent ourselves. But we're really happy with what we've been able to do. And I think that this is something that will continue even in post-COVID. And the challenge will then be how to incorporate both the physical recruitment with your digital recruitment and make sure that you continue doing it. But you know, I think in terms of the strategy and the content is what I was saying before about just making sure that you're empathetic to the students during this time. Expectations really need to be clearly communicated to the student and families. And institutions need to start connecting more with the student and being less institutional centric, just because when we're talking about these savvy customers, they are going to trust information coming from the professors or the alumni or the current students who are experiencing or who have experienced this, moreover than, you know, me, who, when I'm talking to them at a fair for 5 minutes, if I have the time before another student comes. So it's really all about that kind of empathetic and personalization when you're speaking to them, asking them and trying to figure out what their questions are, and then using that to drive your content and create different kinds. And then of course, using more video, and trying to be productive and efficient at the same time, meaning like, for example, with Instagram, if you do an Instagram live with a professor, it's great content, and you can save that. You save that as an IGTV where students can go check it out later and listen to that conversation over and over again. So you don't have to spend so much time trying to create a video when you can just share that live content with them and keep it on your profile.
Great, great. And Chris, what's your approach to students during COVID? Have you also changed the way you communicate?
Personally, in my institution, not so much. We were born in the new world, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, call me a hopeless optimist, and I'm always looking at the positive side of things. But I think, you know, the impact of COVID on student recruitment has been the most positive impact that student recruitment has had for 10 years. I think that finally it's forced everyone to pay more attention to international students and to develop ways of reaching them, which they hadn't before. You know, the student application process isn't very democratic. You know, if you're in the city, if you're a local, national, it's very easy for you. You can get a sense of things. You might have friends who've gone there. You've got all the access in the world. You can pop over to the campus and get a feel for things. If you're applying from China to the States, if you're applying from Guatemala to the UK or anything else, then really your information has been much, much more limited. And I think it's fantastic that finally that started to open up a little bit. Stefania is so right when she says that, you know, they don't want to hear from the institution. I mean, we've gone too far again the other way. We're so sort of everything's so polished, so professional. There's marketing experts, just like all three of us here, who, you know, very shiny information, who look good and sound good. And I think, you know, people want to see what's beyond that. You know, we're not the institution. Even they want to see who they'll go with. So I think that COVID has had a fantastic impact, to be brutally honest, on student recruitment. Anything that makes the process more transparent for international students, anything that makes them feel closer, is a good thing. So yeah, I feel pretty positive about all the work that's been done. And I know it's been painful for a lot of us. I know it's been a hard road. We've had to adapt, but it's been fantastic for the student, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And also we know that virtual experience has exploded in popularity due to COVID. And Stefania, you've already mentioned quite a few things that you are doing. Are there any other things that, Chris, that you can think of when it comes to these virtual experiences that you would recommend institutions with, for example, what they could do?
I think that, you know, I'm a big fan of sustainable recruiting. I know that everyone's got, you know, we'd love to spend and hold the hand of each individual applicant. None of us can. So I'm a big fan of sort of putting things in place which kind of perpetuate themselves. So instead of reinventing the wheel every year for every country, you know, I like the idea of, okay, so if you've decided to do our webinar, well done, but realize that you've already done 90% of the work there. So if you then put that on repeat, and then if you say, no, we're not going to do, we've done all this work to create this webinar with wonderful content, we can do it every month. Different professor with a different alumni, but just make it regular, consistent. And I think, you know, building that sustainable recruitment policy is what we were all dreaming of, where we will never achieve it. We can never just set it up and then just sit and relax, but it'll take a lot of the work out. Again, WhatsApp groups. The classic objection is, oh, but that's a lot of work. Then we're going to spend so much time individually. but not if you use them as a way to disseminate information that they can then go and find themselves from other alumni or other students. So it's just about being smart and setting up routine events, whether it's virtual or anything else. I think that there should be on time and on demand content.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Stefania, that you would like to add in addition to what you have shared about all the things that you do virtually?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like Chris was saying, I mean, it's definitely very important to make sure that that content is always there and always on demand, but that it's not just about, you know, making sure you get a high-tech, really cool virtual tour, but also trying to incorporate the personal feel into that. So Calendly is like our best friend right now. We're always using it, sending it to students. So whenever they want to book something with us, they have it at their disposal and it's on their time. So whenever they want to meet with us, they can. So one thing we did with the virtual tour was sign up for a guided virtual tour, which incorporates that personal, you have the admissions counselor there on the call with you going through the virtual map together. So simulating and recreating things that they were doing pre-COVID that are super important because we all know the campus experience, the campus visit is one of the most important things. But always adding that kind of personal touch and always trying to make sure that you create those emotional connections with the students.
I love it. I love it. What a great idea. And do you think that virtual experiences are here to stay? Will this be the same after we're able to travel the world again? Or will we go back to how things were, you think?
This is a great question, especially as we're all realizing that the current pandemic has created these new normals, like Chris was saying, which are actually fantastic for the students almost, and also fantastic for us. Because before, when you're on the road, I mean, you really don't have that much time even to nurture the students that you met or the counselors that you met. So now you have the opportunity to really create closer connections, even though we're far, but thanks to technology, we're able to still build those connections with our colleagues and our students. And so honestly, I think that this is something that's here to stay. And in a conference I participated in, someone had actually mentioned that recruitment was already moving towards this, going completely digital, but just because of the way our audience is, because our audience is really looking for this kind of content, which you can't get at a physical fair. So the pandemic really kind of accelerated this, and we had to adapt to it really quickly. But you know, this resonated with me because what I'm finding is that this content that we're able to produce is very powerful and it's intriguing to the student. It helps them make a better, more informed decision, and it's interactive. So we get to know the students a little bit more as well in the process.
Do you agree with that, Chris? Do you think?
Totally. I think, again, just if you just think about the difference between the classic student fair and the new virtual student fairs, the good thing about the new virtual student fairs is that they're faster. I mean, you know, we've all been to 1,000 student fairs, and you go there, you set up with your banner, and then, you know, everyone wanders around aimlessly, picking up pens and squeezy toys. And then, you know, there's sometimes a queue around you, and it's like, here's a shiny brochure of curated information, which looks exactly like every other brochure, and you know, and then maybe we'll follow up once I'm back at home in 3 weeks' time. I mean, it's as a concept, it's not great, right? So what I like about the new student fairs is that they tend to, in my experience now, they pop in, they speak to the 3 institutions that they want, and they say, if they're good institutions, they say, fantastic, now is not the time to talk about it, of course, but we'll reach out to you in the next 2 days. And then they say, thank you very much, goodbye. And it's taken 5 minutes of their time. Perfect. That's perfect for everyone involved. Again, somebody was asking on the Q&A as well, how can we get the applicants to the universities or to the schools? And I think ultimately they'll choose the place where which they feel the best about. It's not done with statistics. Nobody sits there. They're not, unless they're applying to sort of accounting and actuarial courses, they're not naturally inclined to sit there and make a spreadsheet. They'll go where feels good, just like everybody else in the world. They go with what feels right. So I think that And a brochure is very poor at making somebody feel right about something. I think that, you know, if they speak to somebody, if they do the virtual fair, and then if you put them in contact, and if you show them a couple of videos as unshiny as possible. I love what Stefania mentioned before about uncurated videos with professors, because reading between the lines, it shows, oh, hey, well, the professors seem nice. Huge tick of the box. You know, oh, well, they seem to be able to talk to their professors on a personal level. You've ticked another box there that's totally invisible boxes that you're ticking instantly for people. And I think those are the hidden metrics. That's the hidden data as to why people are choosing where they want to go to, that is not captured in traditional, the old ways of doing things. So again, I very much hope all these things, all this hard work that you've all put into your institutions' admissions processes are here to stay. They are far superior in my view. So long may they continue.
Great, thank you. Very interesting insight from both of you. Thank you. We have done a little poll. Do you have sufficient resources to deliver your desired nurturing strategy? And 37% say yes, they do. And 63% feel like they don't have that. And how do you, Stefania, feel about this? Does it make sense to you that so many feel like they don't have the right resources here?
Yes, absolutely, because I remember what it was like when we also didn't have the right resources, and how unproductive all of the work we were doing was because we didn't have the, right tools to be able to identify who exactly are the leads that we should be nurturing. Because, when you're buying lists of names and, gathering leads from different fairs and other different outlets, when you find yourself with 20,000 leads and you're just a 2-people team, well, what do you do now? You tried to cold call them? No, that's not going to work. So without those tools, it can be difficult. So it is important. I mean, I know it's difficult, but it is important to at least try to convince who is above and kind of making these decisions and budget decisions on making sure that you're using the right tools, or at least outsourcing with other companies that do this kind of work, so that the work that you're doing is productive. Because it's not enough just to say, wow, I have 20,000 leads, we're definitely going to convert some apps. No, it takes a lot of work, and it's really necessary that you score those leads efficiently. Platforms nowadays are just so good at automating and integrating with other platforms. So all the actions that your leads are taking are getting tracked. And then, you kind of just assign automatic tasks that say, go now. That person is ready for a phone call, call them. And it's really makes your life easier. But of course, if you don't have those resources, there are other ways that you can try and make sure that you nurture those leads, because it's important work to be done.
No, completely. I want to go to the next slide here, and it is a lot about what you also mentioned, Stefania. Chris, what type of personalization do you use in your communication with students? Do you personalize it at all at the moment?
Sure. Yeah, I think that I think the natural instinct of everyone is to when we've, I mean, this is a perfect time to answer that question, because we've just talked about limited resources, right? So how can we go from the previous slide where we're saying everyone feels as if they've got limited resources to this slide where we're suddenly going to say it should be super personalized? Is there not a disconnect there? But I don't think there has to be a disconnect. I think that a lot of personalization can happen right off the bat, before you've even put in a lot of work. That makes a big difference. I hate seeing those dear candidate emails. My God, it's so simple to get a, to program your CRM to put in an F name field. I mean, I don't want to get too technical here, but it's so simple. The resources are available. There should be no dear candidates. And it makes a big difference. Small interventions make a huge difference. You don't have to personally say, "Hi, Stefania, thank you so much for applying. I see that you're based in Rome. That's lovely. I went there with my kid last week." I mean, that would be nice, I guess, but you don't need to, just a little bit. And if I'm going to be very mercenary about this, you just need to be better than the other institutions that they're applying to. So if one institution has a, "Hey, Chris, thanks for applying," and one is, "Thank you, candidate," I immediately am feeling better about one than the other. So any small personalization makes a huge difference, whether it's just the name, whether it's just reaching out and letting them know who you are. Again, a small thing. When I reach out to candidates, it's always from Chris. It's never from the office of. And I know that people are worried about this. Somebody asked a question before, like I was looking at the questions. Somebody said, "Oh my God, but if you do WhatsApp, how does that's going to hurt? Like when the students reach out, they already reach out at, I think they said, ungodly hours." Of course they do. It's like suddenly it's like you're getting bombarded with somebody who's just decided to reach out to you at 4 a.m. But that's, but it's still, you don't have to be responsive at 4 a.m, but just reaching out from Chris. Maybe Chris doesn't need to reply to you next time. Maybe Stefania can reply to you, but just knowing that there is then a Chris and a Stefania in that recruitment office, it's a little bit more personal. So there's a lot of quick wins. And I think that 90% of us could make a couple of quick wins almost instantly before we get fancy and before we go into really advanced methods of personalization.
Great. I just wanted to share something that we offer with our free CRM system for our customers called Workflows. And Workflow is a set of emails that combine automation and personalization. And with this tool, you can set up as many emails as you want and choose the frequency so that each lead gets the same attention and information. And you can add videos, pictures, links, and attachments to make it as engaging and interesting as possible. And the student can reply and you can interact with the student once they're ready. So I think this is important as well to make sure that you keep track of all your student leads at all times. I wish I could talk to you forever, but I want to get a couple of questions from the audience in. So I have a couple to choose from here. I have one here. We've been talking a lot about undergrad recruitment, but do you have any tips for master and PhD recruitment? They tend to be more demanding and not so easy to convert. I know, Chris, you have a lot of experience with MBA and EMBA. Do you have any tips here?
Sure. Yeah, I started my career in student recruitment in postgraduate, and then so I came to this in the reverse way. So then I moved to UG. It's true that they are different. They are more informed. They're a little bit even more savvy than otherwise. But I take the view that the more informed and the more savvy the applicant is, the better. I mean, we should never be afraid of informed and savvy customers. So they can be tough. They want to do things a little bit more on their terms, potentially. But again, that's a positive, I think. They're much more upfront and they say, "This is what I'm looking for. This is what I want from you. Please go and give it to me." Fine by me. I'd much prefer that kind of demand than somebody who's just sort of floating along, keeping me guessing. So I think that removing a lot of the fluff from application flows for MBAs and general master's degrees is super important. There should be very little fluff anyway, to be frank, but there should even less fluff as you move into postgraduate. They do work a little bit more on solid KPIs. They've done a lot more research before they first come to you. They're also, and this is the critical difference, they're making this decision themselves. Mm-hmm. Like it or not, a lot of the undergraduate applicants are applying to university and they've never really questioned why. It's just part of the natural cycle of life that they go to university. for masters, that's becoming more and more true, but still it feels like a more conscious adult decision that they're making. So they're coming to you with a preformed, I'm going to do a master's and I want to think about this. So it's a little bit different. I do think you need a very different strategy for postgrad than undergrad. And I think you need to network with as many other people in the postgrad space as you can, because it's got a very different flavor and look and feel.
Great. Okay, let's take one more. Stefania, for you, what is the best advice that can sell a student on choosing your school or program?
Oh, that's a great question. Best advice. Well, something that we've been talking a lot is kind of moving away from those pretty shiny videos and content and kind of providing that more authentic, like real, even just shooting like this with your iPhone type of thing. Because one thing that we've noticed is that our students who have their own personal vlogs and are vlogging their experience have 10 times the views on their videos organically than videos that we've actually spent time and money to create and sponsor and share ads on. So that kind of organic content is what they're looking for. And that's what we've been doing, actually. We just use iPhones now. We've done like a vlog campus tour where we've done like 5 series, filmed with an iPhone, using students, not really scripted. It's kind of just like, hey, come look at our campus type of thing. And that stuff is really working and resonating with this type of generation of students. And they also tend to get involved and, let's say, engage with students. Let's say we have admissions ambassadors and they're constantly on our social media platforms kind of connecting with students, and we find that students will then also follow the profiles of our admissions ambassadors, their personal ones. I mean, we say, of course, that that's not something that they're obligated to do, and they can block or not accept these students, but they tend to usually do it, and we find that students really like to see the real student life, what they're doing, what's their day-to-day, what kind of daily activities do they do when they're on campus. And this is what's working. So my advice is to don't be scared. I know that, you know, it might seem you are being unprofessional if you're on TikTok, but don't be scared, really, because this is where our audience is, and this is where we need to be in order to connect with them. And this is my advice.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Great finish there. Unfortunately, our time is up. And thank you so much, Stefania and Chris, for all your insight and knowledge that you shared with us today. As I said in the beginning, we will be sending out an email in a couple of days with the recording of this webinar, and we are looking forward to our next event, and we will share more details about that soon. And thank you so much for joining, and have a great day or evening.